Well, it's hard to believe that it's been 20 years since the September 11th attacks, and the whole NASCAR community is remembering that today. We at the Motor Racing Network wanted to look back at the impact it had from a NASCAR perspective. Kurt Becker leads us through.
As Americans, we have patriotism for our country. It's the reason we sing the national anthem and celebrate the 4th of July. But on the 20th anniversary of the September 11th terrorist attacks, we are reminded of patriotism in a different context. 20 years ago, NASCAR raced at Richmond under the lights, 3 days before the attacks, before everything changed.
A big part of NASCAR heritage is Saturday night racing on short tracks. Tonight, we're back under the lights in Richmond, Virginia, where 43 drivers are about to get rowdy.
Rusty Wallace works the middle of the banking. Harvick drops down low. Rudd swings wide. Harvick is up to challenge, and now Rusty Wallace loses it on the backstretch. He goes darting down to the inside lane of the racetrack. He falls all the way back to fourth.
Might have had a little contact there just between those two for a moment, and Rusty has slid all the way back to fourth. Here's a scramble for the lead. Harvick going after Ricky Rudd, who led at the start-finish line. They are a dead heat off turn
Kevin
2.
Harvick comes back off of turn number 2, swings the car out next to the outside wall. At the same time, guarding the rear flank, Ricky Rudd is waiting to pounce behind the leader.
Be 5 laps to go when they come off turn number 4 this time. Ricky's there, makes a run off turn number 4, gets underneath Harvick. Couldn't tell if they made any contact up in the corner, but I believe they did, and Ricky is long gone. 2 car lengths ahead. Can Harvick get back up there, or can he hang on to second?
Here comes Ricky Rudd back into the corner now, working the middle of the 14-degree banking. He's on the backstretch for the final time tonight. Ricky Rudd, a 7-car length advantage over Kevin Harvick in turn 3.
Ricky Rudd coming through turns 3 and 4 for the final time, now headed to the start-finish line, scoring his second Winston Cup win of the 2001 season, and doing it in his home state of Virginia. His second win here at Richmond International Raceway. Kevin Harvick comes into the second spot.
Kevin, not sure where to start. It got awful physical out there. Tell us about those last 10 laps.
Well, we aired our tires up knowing it was going to be a short run, and they kind of got to scooting there at the end, and I just got misjudged a little bit coming off the corner and got in the back of Ricky, and he gave a little bit of it back. But I mean, that's short track racing. I don't know what I got to do to win a race here at Richmond. We always run really good, but good night for this Goodwrench car, and the Taz was in commission tonight.
A lot of folks thought there'd be some hot tempers afterwards, but it seemed like Dale Earnhardt Jr. came over, smiling, congratulate you. You did the same thing to Ricky Rudd, so good hard racing.
Yeah, I mean, that's all it is. I mean, it's short track racing. It's Richmond, Bristol. I mean, sometimes you run into each other a little bit, and we're all grown men. We are out there knowing how to race. So he gave it, I gave it, and it's part of it.
The NASCAR Cup Series was scheduled to move on to New Hampshire Motor Speedway the following weekend. That would change after Tuesday, September 11th.
It's 8:52 here in New York. I'm Bryant Gumbel. We understand that there has been a plane crash on the southern tip of Manhattan. You're looking at the World Trade Center. We understand that a plane has crashed into the World Trade Center. We don't know anything more than that. We don't know if it was a commercial aircraft. You have no idea right now.
Oh, there's another one. Another plane just hit. Right. Oh, my God. Another plane has just hit. It hit another building. Flew right into the middle of it. Explosion. My God, it's right in the middle of the building.
This one into the East Tower.
Yes. Yes. Right in the middle of the building.
And we also have a report now that it was a plane that crashed into the Pentagon, and we have a large fire at the Pentagon. The Pentagon is being evacuated as we speak now. The White House has been evacuated as well. CNN's John King.
Today, our fellow citizens, our way of life, our very freedom came under attack in a series of deliberate and deadly terrorist acts. The victims were in airplanes or in their offices. Secretaries, businessmen and women, military and federal workers, moms and dads, friends and neighbors.
As the country and the world watched the events unfold, there was confusion. No one understood what was happening or why it was happening. NASCAR Hall of Famer Jeff Gordon remembers seeing and disbelieving.
I was sitting at home in Florida at the time I was living there, and I just remember somebody came to me and said, turn on the news, turn on the news. I turned it on, and that was, I believe, right about the time the second airplane was hitting the Twin Towers, and I just, like most people, just was in disbelief, didn't understand, had so many questions, and just devastated.
MRN booth announcer Joe Moore.
That morning, we were in our apartment in Virginia Beach. Woke up that morning, had some breakfast. We were listening to music, didn't have the TV on. And I just had called the airport to talk to one of the gate agents to see if I could rearrange a schedule for an upcoming flight for a race trip the following weekend. And when we got on the phone, he says, wow, wasn't it something about that airplane that flew into a building in New York? And I was like, what? He said, yeah, this airplane flew into a building, and it's done all kinds of damage. So I immediately told Tiffany, turn the television on, and we started watching. And of course, as it turned out, we sat there the rest of the day, glued to the TV, trying to figure out what in the world happened and how could this be.
Mike Helton was in his first year as president of NASCAR. He had already helped the sport move forward from the tragedy of the Daytona 500 earlier that year with the loss of Dale Earnhardt. But this was something of a different nature.
I was on the phone with a gentleman in Washington, D.C., and I think he was still at home, and he was watching TV, and he said, "Did you just see that on television?" I said, "No." He said, that morning started to unfold. And then I called Bill Jr., I called Jim France, talked to Brian France, and we started huddling up in Bill Jr.'s office. And at that time, or early on in the day, you just, like everybody else in the world, and particularly in America, you were trying to figure out what was happening. You had to sort through because there was a lot of speculation on what might be going on. You didn't know what might happen next because this was all early in the day. You're looking around thinking, is it the Sears Tower in Illinois? Is it the Golden Gate Bridge? What, when all the speculation started turning into more realistic information and facts, you're thinking, what else is out there that we don't know about yet that can happen?
Executive Director of the NASCAR Hall of Fame and former lead pit reporter for MRN, Winston Kelly, had a different kind of experience that day.
Interestingly, I was in Washington, D.C. as a part of a trip for my full-time job with Duke Energy, attending a meeting, and I guess I would describe the feeling as surreal. We were supposed to have the Secretary of Department of Transportation make a presentation. They came in and said he wasn't going to be able to join us. I believe it was Mineta at the time, that they had reports that a small plane apparently flew into the side of a building inadvertently in New York. Obviously now we know that was so much different, and one of the folks that was with us had gone out to make a call back to his office. He came back in and said, "We need to leave, we're being bombed." And then as we were departing, we could see congressmen coming in, and we were in the Capitol building, which is right there in the middle of everything. Could see people coming in, getting ready to do a controlled, safe exodus. And so as we walk out of the building through some doors, we're looking directly at the black smoke, and it was the Pentagon. So that part was just incredibly surreal. There wasn't a lot of activity on the street yet, but you could see people scurrying around.
There were no answers. As the day came to an end, it seemed as if nothing else mattered. Jobs didn't matter, neither did movies or TV, or even sports. Motor Racing Network's NASCAR Live was scheduled for broadcast that night. But with everything that had occurred, it became evident that this too would require a departure from what was originally planned.
Good evening and welcome to NASCAR Live. I'm Eli Gold. On this day, a day of profound national tragedy, it is clearly inappropriate and virtually impossible to think about anything other than the terrible loss of life and loss of innocence that our country suffered this morning. To talk about NASCAR racing or any other form of entertainment at a time such as this would be an affront to the sensitivities and sensibilities of any caring person. Consequently, for the first time in the 19-year history of our program, NASCAR Live will not be heard as a live talk show tonight, so that we might together pause to reflect on the events of the day. A new live edition of NASCAR Live from MRN Radio will return next Tuesday night at this regularly scheduled time.
Well, I remember many of those events very vividly as if they were yesterday. Coming up, we will continue honoring the 20th anniversary of 9/11 through a NASCAR lens as we close in on the start of the second playoff race in the NASCAR Cup Series. The Federated Auto Parts 400 salute to first responders at Richmond Raceway.
From Richmond Raceway, this is NASCAR Live Race Day. Now, back to Woody Kane.
Welcome back to Richmond Raceway as we get set for race number 2 in the NASCAR Cup Series playoffs for the 2021 season. We're remembering 9/11 through a NASCAR perspective and the shock that America felt after those September 11th attacks would last for weeks. But NASCAR had some time-sensitive decisions to make. Kurt Becker continues our story.
As the rescue work continued in New York, Washington, D.C., and Pennsylvania, the country searched for answers. NASCAR moved quickly on a decision about racing that weekend at New Hampshire. By Thursday, it was announced there would be no racing that weekend. New Hampshire's race would move to November 23rd, the day after Thanksgiving. Mike Helton was a guest on NASCAR Live 1 week after the attacks to discuss the decision.
This episode that took place last Tuesday, it was just overwhelming, and we immediately canceled Friday's activity in New Hampshire to allow logistics and time to take its course. And as the elements unfolded during the week, it simply just made a whole lot of sense, not only just for NASCAR but for baseball and football and other sports as well, just to say, look, it's a good opportunity to take a time out here. Let's just put our concentrated activities on the shelf and unite behind the president, the America, the firemen that are working in the police departments and the military and everybody that we're doing much bigger than what we do. And we'll be back and we'll get the job done. And as we were looking at the options to replace New Hampshire, what do we do? Because we're going to run a race. That's what we do. And we're going to run that race somewhere. And or at some time, as we looked at the options that we had, from logistics to timing to the impact that it had on other events for the balance of the season, while November the 23rd looks a bit awkward, that was the least encumbered opportunity to reschedule New Hampshire.
As the days passed, the next question was whether the schedule would resume as planned, with Dover Downs International Speedway scheduled to host the next race. Dover track president Dennis McGlynn says he contacted Helton the day of the attacks, but had to wait for NASCAR's decision.
I guess he called me later in the week. I honestly don't remember what day it was, but he said, "You're up. We skipped New Hampshire, and you're up next. So get ready." And at that point, soon after anyway, we must have had every law enforcement agency at the federal and state level here. The ATF was here, the FBI was here, state police all over the place. It was pretty intense, from a terrorist, first of all, recognition, and then planning for the safety of a couple 100,000 people that were going to be here in the next few days. The tensions were high because nobody could estimate from what direction a threat could come. It could come from the air, it could come from the ground. Somebody could come in with a bomb strapped to them. There could be bombs in the trash cans. So there were bomb-sniffing dogs all over the place. And, of course, under the circumstances, even small things became big things.
Once the decision was made to hold the Dover race, security protocols were heightened to unprecedented levels at the front gates, the garage, and in the stands. It was clear that NASCAR was doing everything possible to provide a safe environment. Yet, Joe Moore says there was still the feeling of the unknown.
I think everybody was quite apprehensive. We're all really looking around for anything suspicious that we might see. Felt like that it was quite certain that NASCAR had taken care of everything to be on the safe side, and there was plenty of security around. We all knew that, but I don't think I've ever been to an event where everybody was constantly looking around to the right, to the left, in front and back, behind walls, in closets, whatever, because after what we had seen on 9/11, nothing would have surprised us at that point.
As the race day broadcast began, it was evident even to those who were not at the track that this was an extraordinary moment. It was a gathering which stood united.
Today is a very special day for NASCAR. Today's race, a celebration of the freedom we all enjoy and, of course, we cherish in this great nation. Popular singer Lee Greenwood, in a song he made famous about 10 years ago. He's live here at Dover Downs International Speedway. We now join him on the stage trackside.
God bless the USA.
Jarrett slides up the racetrack. Here comes Dale Jr. to the inside.
Jr. makes his move off turn 4, swings around and takes the top spot on lap 362. DJ falls in line in
Dale
second.
Earnhardt Jr. heading off turn number 4. He'll see the white flag when he crosses the stripe this time. 1 lap to go as he comes down and heads off into turn 1. Can anybody catch him? I don't think so, but we'll find out as they head over to turn 2.
Barney, he's all by himself. Back to turn 2. The Budweiser Chevrolet up onto the back straightaway. He has lap cars ahead of him, but he won't catch them as Dale Jr. set sail into turn 3, looking for the checkered flag off turn 4.
It'll be a very popular win here at Dover Downs this afternoon. He won at Daytona in the Pepsi 400. He scores his second win here today in the first state of Delaware. Dale Earnhardt Jr.
Doing the burnout here in the front straightaway, carrying an American flag as he comes back up by the start-finish line to the cheers of 140,000 race fans.
It's a really emotional day. Really happy to have carried the American flag around the racetrack here at the end. I've never done a Polish victory lap before. That's probably the last one I'll do, but it was for good reason. And
Mike Helton says the energy from the pre-race ceremonies was like nothing he had ever experienced.
The energy building up to the start of the race was, and we get accused of scripting things, but, you know, we put the puzzle pieces in there. You got Tanya Tucker, you got Lee Greenwood, you got Cal Ripken Jr., you got military from Dover Air Force Base, you got, but the fans with the flags were the hero of the day.
MRN's Mike Bagley.
2001 was that roller coaster year of up and down emotion, and Dale Jr. was the axis of all of this. He was in the center of all of this, and you mourned with him and you felt his loss, but you smiled with him, and you felt his celebration, you felt his relief twice at Daytona and Dover.
Jeff Gordon echoes those feelings.
I remember having these moments in these days, and it still even happens today with our most popular driver, Chase Elliott. But it just seems ironic when our most popular driver wins, and you go, that was meant to be, and we're all going to be okay, and that kind of reminds us and tells us that it's going to be okay. So I think with Dale Jr. winning that race, that sort of was the message to everyone within the garage area and the fans, taking putting aside your competitiveness and your desire to want to win. You kind of leave there going, yeah, that's how it should have gone down.
Dennis McGlynn says the emotions from that day still give him goosebumps.
I think that the emotions were just all let out at the end of that race. There were people in the stands that were just bawling. They just couldn't believe it. It was a very stressful year, losing Dale Sr. At Daytona. It's kind of like a fairy tale ending. It's kind of a corny way to put it, but it was so totally appropriate.
20 years after that race, Mike Bagley says that day was the single most patriotic moment he's ever been a part of.
In stark contrast to today's life and living, there was a tremendous sense of brotherhood back then. It was a tremendous wave of just emotion and patriotism and proud to be an American, and that's never been replicated again, at least to me. I've never experienced anything like that. I was so proud of the fan base that day. I mean, American flags, the chants of USA, 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 USA. It was incredible to be a part of.
The season moved forward, as did America. Each day that passed was one step closer to healing and finding answers. When the NASCAR season ended at New Hampshire on November 23rd, the emotion